For most of the draft process so far, we've been made to believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. was not an option for the Chargers with the 5th overall pick, but after the combine, it's starting to feel a little bit more realistic, and if he's there, you have to take him.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen. We appreciate all the everydayers out there, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, I don't like this feeling. I don't like that they're doing this to me. They're giving me hope. Could it possibly happen? Could they pair Marvin Harrison Jr. with Justin Herbert? Man, it's starting to feel like an actual possibility. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Jesse Minter and his defense, and could it be better than Brandon Staley's in year one? And also, we got some information from Jeremy Fowler from the Combine, and we got to talk all about it.
Yeah, he gave us an update and kind of where he's feeling with every big Chargers potential cap casualty with Mac Bosa, Keenan Allen, right? All of those guys, Mike Williams. It's interesting because the Combine, it is about the measurements. It's more about the conversations that are happening there. That's where the gold really is there. But it's also smokescreen season. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, we don't want to get hurt. We don't want to get our hopes up. It was the same thing with Jim Harbaugh, right? Like it was hard to kind of really believe it was going to happen. In this whole entire draft process, we've been kind of under the assumption there's no way that Marvin Harrison Jr. gets out of the top 4. Not realistically. It didn't feel realistic. But then you have Diana Rossini coming out after the Combine, right, on a podcast with Robert Mays on the Athletic Football Show. And then she says this: I had a very smart GM tell me 1, 2, 3, 4 about the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class. David, it's buy or sell Tuesday. The biggest storylines and overreactions. Is this an overreaction? There is a realistic chance that Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to the 5th overall pick.
Yeah, it's still hard for me to believe it. It's still hard for to let my mind go there to that possibility. But I think there is actually some legitimate reasons why you could actually entertain it. And I think obviously Diana Rossini is very reputable when you know she does talk to people. She has a ton of contacts. She has a high hit rate. So when she says stuff, you have to kind of pay attention to it. You have to listen. That's one thing. I think the other thing is there's a lot of buzz around J.J. McCarthy. And I think his name has absolutely shot up the list of quarterbacks and guys that they're really starting to entertain. I mean, obviously the quarterback is the most volatile, the most coveted, the most prized position in all of the National Football League. You don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. So teams will get desperate. They will over-evaluate. They will fall in love with a prospect because they got to have it. They got to go get one. And I think that mixed with, you know, somebody maybe trading up to Arizona, it could happen, Daniel. It could happen.
This is what Robert Mays said. I think we all just anticipated that if the draft fell 1, 2, 3 as far as the quarterbacks go, and Marvin Harrison Jr. was there, it would be a no-brainer for the Cardinals. I don't believe that now. Right, and between the Chargers and the Cardinals, one of them is probably going to get a king's ransom offer from somebody, right? If somebody feels that highly, not only about J.J. McCarthy, but also about Jaden Daniels too, right? You have to have 2 teams that love both of them because you need those first 3 to go quarterback, and you need whoever's left of the big 4, but really like those big 2 to have somebody want to come up to get him, right? So I think it did feel impossible before. And I'm buying this because it does feel like there's a realistic non-zero chance now that Marvin Harrison Jr. gets there. It's just, the Cardinals have a ton of holes. J.J. McCarthy's draft stock has skyrocketed over the last couple of weeks.
No doubt.
The stars are aligning for something that happened to Tom Telesco several times. Sometimes it falls into your lap, right? And
Yeah.
this becomes the question now, David. Buy or sell. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, you take him no matter what, and you don't trade back.
Marvin Harrison Jr., no matter what, absolutely you got to buy it. I mean, do not overthink this. This is not a tough one. The proof is in the pudding. Okay, there's a lot of reasons to like Marvin Harrison Jr. One, he's 6'3", 202 pounds. He has prototypical size, speed. He comes from a legendary NFL bloodline. He was learning how to play in the NFL when he was a kid. When he was 5, 6 years old on the sideline, playing, catch with his dad, playing catch with Peyton Manning probably. Yeah. And also, we're talking about
Hall of Famers. Yeah.
Big time production. Like, I mean, the production's real. We're talking 77 catches, 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns. And then in 2023, 67 catches, 1,211 yards, 14 touchdowns again, 18.1 yards per catch. He's a can't-miss prospect. He gets open with ease. He has glue for hands. He is a physical run blocker. Like, pretty much every aspect of his game is already NFL ready. He's going to light up the NFL. And, oh, my goodness. You pair him with Justin freaking Herbert. Magic, fireworks, explosive explosions. That is something I would absolutely love to see.
Yeah, and I think to his credit, like, he still put up ridiculous stats with Kyle McCord. Like, his best season was when he had CJ Stroud, obviously, and he put up insane banana numbers. But then to do what he did this year with Kyle McCord, who immediately after the season transferred to Syracuse because he couldn't cut it at Ohio State, like, I think tells you a lot. Yeah. And I think that just, if you're talking about him, like, there's an argument that he's the best player in this class. Like, that's what we're talking about. Getting maybe the best player in this draft class, getting someone who's a need for you, and also getting, the best receiver when you're not going to have a chance for another generational receiver like this, you hope, ever under Jim Harbaugh, right? Because you're hoping to never be in a position where you're picking inside the top 5 again. To have someone like that, not just, to be able to draft them, but to not have to give anything up to go get them, to have them fall into your lap. Another part of it is the trade value is very much diminished if someone is paying that ransom to go up to Arizona at 4 to get a quarterback. Then 4 quarterbacks have been taken. Is anyone sending you a king's ransom to go up and get, Joe Alt or, Bo Nix? Probably not. Not the
Highly
same.
Unlikely.
You don't get that same thing as where someone's desperate, because scarcity is what raises the prices in a market, right? And so when you're talking about that kind of scarcity with the quarterback position, having those top 3 guys off of the board, like, that is something that creates the panic and makes someone kind of overdo what they would give for a trade, So I think that's part of it. And I just think that you're right. You don't overthink it. If he's there, you take him. Even though trading back has been something we've talked about, the Chargers have a ton of holes too. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, you don't overthink it. You go up there, you sprint up to the podium, and you take him. But I do want to get to this one because obviously it would be great to pair Justin Herbert with Marvin Harrison Jr. with that cannon arm. But we also saw that cannon arm doing something a little bit different, because the Chargers posted Justin Herbert playing dodgeball. And the buy or sell is this, David. You do not want to play dodgeball against Justin Herbert.
That is an absolute buy without any question. I mean, my goodness, he's 6'6", 240 pounds. So that means he's bigger than you, he's faster than you, he's stronger than you, he's smarter than you, and he is an absolute rocket for an arm. Yeah, that's a bad day at the office, no matter how you line it up. I do not want to have anything to do with going up against Justin Herbert. It seems like he genuinely enjoys throwing absolute laser beam missiles at kids and probably putting them on the sideline for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the velocity. Like, you didn't even see, like, where the ball ended up, probably because it maybe, like, maimed a small child or something like that, so they couldn't show where the ball ended up. But, like, the velocity was just so intense. It also brings up another thing, too, because if you guys remember, Justin Herbert got in trouble for playing basketball at one point because the video came out of him dunking on somebody, right? And then all of a sudden, you didn't see Justin Herbert playing basketball anymore. And that was something that was kind of a Tom Telesco thing. I remember the Lightning Round put something out about, like, Denzel Perryman, when he was a rookie, got reprimanded for playing dodgeball as he was recovering from some injuries and things like that. So maybe this is a little different under this new regime where they'll kind of let them do what they want to do. Hey, do I want them to get hurt? Obviously not, but as long as they're not, Jason Pierre-Paul and playing with fireworks. Like it's most of these things are pretty manageable, and you kind of have to let the players go do what they want to do. Sure. Guarantee you, Keenan Allen's playing a ton of basketball. All these guys are playing a ton of basketball. They shouldn't have to worry about getting reprimanded. But yeah, dodgeball with a couple of broken fingers the year before, a little scary. But you have to trust Justin Herbert's going to do what's best for him and take care of himself like he always has. So. Yeah, you don't want to play dodgeball with Justin Herbert. But I do want to continue this buy or sell here, David, talking about Jesse Minter and what he has to work with on this defense and what could be the reasonable expectations before dunking all over the Broncos for making maybe the worst trade and the worst contract in NFL history. All that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It can be easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with social gatherings picking up after the winter. What's the right amount of socializing for you, and how do you recharge? Maybe you thrive around people, or maybe you need some more alone time. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery, and I think that's one of the great things about therapy is getting an unbiased person to talk to that's not going to judge you, that's not going to guilt trip you for not spending time with them, to help you find a way to fully maximize what you're getting out of your day and finding out how you spend your time and how much you appreciate the things you're spending the time on. So when you do them, you're not feeling like you're totally drained. And I think the great thing about BetterHelp is it's entirely online, right? So it can work around your schedule. It's designed to be convenient and flexible. And all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. David, let's continue this Chargers buy or sell here because I wanted to get into the defensive side of things for the Chargers. And one of the things you kind of brought up was just how the Chargers, going into this offseason and free agency, the draft coming up, and just kind of the resources we need to see added to this Chargers defense. Because you can get the best mind in the world, right? But you got to give them some tools to work with. So the buy or sell is this. The Chargers need to give Jesse Minter some help if they want to expect better results in 2024.
Yeah, that's a definite buy. I'm very excited about Jesse Minter coming in, and I'm a fan of the scheme. I think there's some similarities there, obviously, with Brandon Staley's scheme, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of a learning curve. Obviously, every single guy's going to bring in and change the flavor, but there is a lot of holes on this roster, especially on the defensive side. And, when you look at it, like you can look at pretty much every single group, whether it's top to bottom, from the safeties in the corners to middle, the linebackers to the guys on the defensive line. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel like there's a lot of guys that are there, right? You love the Derwin James, Joey Bosa when he's healthy. If you got Khalil Mack, Asante gives you some plays, but even with that kind of foundation of talent, there's still so many different things that need to be added to, that need to be increased in order to give him the best possibility to go out there and get the most out of what he has.
Yeah, I think the fair question is just like, how many players do you know are good on this defense? Because you bring up Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, where you're not going to have both of those guys, right?
Yeah.
Like even Derwin James, you're hoping for a bounce back season because he wasn't good for a lot of last season, right? Like you said, Asante Samuel Jr. is up and down. So like, how many of these players that were expecting Jesse Minter to go out there and turn into a great defense do you really feel like are great players, right? There's guys that we know.
Didn't even say Thule, right?
Yeah, Thule is one of them. Thule's on the list. Thule's legit good. One of Mac or Bosa is good. It's easy to see how Derwin James could be better in 2024, obviously. But, like, you're going to have to lose one of Mac or Bosa, and that's one of your stalwart players. That's one of your guys you were building around, right? It opens up a huge hole, and the team is obviously better if you have both of those guys healthy. But, like, the front seven needs a lot of work on the linebacker and D-line position. And I think my point here is just, like, I do think Jesse Minter is going to bring a lot as far as the improvement and the things schematically and playing to his player strengths and things like that you can get excited about. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to pour some resources into this unit, whether it's in free agency, whether it's in the draft. And you just have to have some faith, I guess, that Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh leading this team in a new direction and what they can add is going to be enough, which brings us to the next buy or sell, which is this. Jesse Minter's year one defense could be better than any of the defenses we saw under Brandon Staley.
Yeah, I know this might sound crazy, but I'm buying it. And the reason why I'm going to buy it
because it's an incredibly low bar.
It is a very low bar. I mean, we're talking about a bottom 5 defense the last 3 times that Brandon Staley was authoring that defense.
I mean, his best was 22nd in points per game, right? So that's in 2022. That was the best as far as points per game that his defense ever did. As far as yards per game, it was 20th in 2022. So you're talking about a top 20 defense here, basically, is what this question is.
Yeah, and also I think, when you look at the defense and you look at kind of how the resources were managed, more specifically Derwin James, I feel like, when you hear Jesse Minter talk about Derwin James and you kind of, really dive into that, he really says, hey, he was given way too many different responsibilities. We know what Derwin James does well. We're going to try to put him in that situation as many times as we possibly can. It's really exciting when you have a guy like Derwin James because he can do so many different things, but it might be better just to give him one thing to focus on and let him go absolutely destroy doing that one thing. So I think Jesse Minter being more intentional about using the weapons that he does have is going to create a lot of positive results. Also, the other thing that stuck with me is I'm not going to give them more than these guys can handle. He's going to teach them this defense, make sure they have it down, make sure they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then once they have that down, then they're going to increase that difficulty and they're going to get more and more sophisticated on the defensive side. I think that's going to turn into really, really positive results really quickly.
Yeah, and shout out to Haley Elwood, who had to sit down with Jesse Minter where he went over, a lot of his philosophies.
Yes, shout out to Haley. She's the GOAT.
Yeah, and a former guest on the show. So for me, the reason I believe it, because I think you're bringing up a lot of valid points, is more because I have more trust in, first of all, Joe Ortiz being able to give him enough in this one offseason to work with, where you're not going to have stars at every position, but do enough in free agency in the value bin, right? And do enough in the draft to give Jesse Minter at least a few more pieces that we don't know about now to help him kind of bring this defense to some sort of prominence, right? Or at least to mediocrity, right? At least to the 16 level, right? Which is half of the league. That's all you're really looking for. And getting to purely average makes you better than what Brandon Staley had, right? And the biggest thing there is Brandon Staley's schemes worked. His philosophies work. He's very well respected.
Yeah.
The problem is what we've talked about before. He came in with Ronaldo Hill, who had never been a defensive coordinator at the NFL level before, and came from Vic Fangio's scheme, not Brandon Staley's scheme, because they're not identical, right? Brought in Derek Ansley's and other guys from, prominent colleges and things like that, but not guys who had implemented his scheme before.
Different programs,
Jesse Minter not only has been a defensive coordinator, obviously running this exact defense, which obviously at the collegiate level, but we've seen it already translate with Mike McDonald back to the NFL level.
And he brought his whole staff with him.
He brought his whole staff to help implement it, because the thing is the Staley's defense wasn't really the problem. The installation of the defense and how the defense translated was the much bigger issue, why you had so many busted coverages and things like that. And when it did work, it was awesome, right? But it was just too far between and it was too complex. And I mean, one thing Jesse Minter said is he doesn't believe in defensive play calls. He doesn't believe in big, long play calls that, ask their players to think about a lot of things. Like, it's really, really simplified. If he can live up to that, I definitely think he could be better than 20th in the NFL in yards per game allowed and 22nd in points per game allowed. So I think it's very realistic, partially because that is a very low line. We're talking about mediocre being, 5-6 spots better than what Brandon Staley ever had. But we have to get to this last buy or sell here because it's too funny not to. The Russell Wilson trade, because Russell Wilson, for those who don't know, was officially told he was going to be released when the new league year starts on March 13th, is one of the worst trades in NFL history.
It gives me great pleasure to say absolutely yes.
What
a crazy dumpster fire. I am buying it. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris in exchange for Russell Wilson, a 4th-round pick, and they gave Russell Wilson a 5-year, $242.6 million contract that is now resulting in, because of his release, $85 million in dead money over the next 2 years. What a catastrophic astrological failure.
I mean, and you know what? just to be fair, the Chargers would know a thing or two about that, because of the J.C. Jackson trade, right? But the one thing that makes you feel better about eating $20 million in dead cap hits for J.C. Jackson is seeing your division rival have to eat a record $85 million in dead cap for Russell Wilson. Shout out to my boys at Lock On Broncos, Cody Rourke and Sarah Bettinger. They deserve better. And I feel bad laughing about, division rivals, except for that I don't, right? This is good news for the Chargers because not only, David, did they give up all of those things, which is like, he never made it to the contract extension. He was still under the same contract that he already had before the extension. It hadn't even kicked in yet, and they're already getting rid of him. They got Sean Payton, obviously, after Russell Wilson. Nathaniel Hackett was a total dumpster fire as well. But the other thing is, they're losing all those things, right? They're a little strapped for like draft capital and things like that because they traded a first-round pick for Sean Payton, because they traded multiple for Russell Wilson. And the other thing is, they still don't have a quarterback. They had all of those things, right? And they're going to be in such a bad position, and they still don't have a quarterback. Easily, maybe the worst contract given out in NFL history. One of the worst trades done in NFL history. It is hilarious. And I mean, undoubtedly, I didn't go back and look at every trade in franchise or in NFL history. But how does it get worse?
You don't even have to.
It's
just crazy bad.
You don't. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's one of the best. And for the Chargers, right? One of the best things I've ever seen, because it's one of the worst trades, one of the worst contracts I've ever seen. But we have more to get into, including Jeremy Fowler spilling some combine tea and giving some intel on all of the biggest 4 decisions the Chargers have to make this offseason with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. And he tells us what he thinks is going to happen. We're getting into that and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all of your NBA favorites and your favorite players with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. And one of the great things about FanDuel is there are almost always great promotions going on where they will give you a good chance to have not only a great time betting, but also give you some fun things to play around with. And especially with March Madness coming around the corner, the NBA playoffs coming up, there's no better time to get in on the action and find a great bet. You're going to find a bet you feel good about to win that $150 in bonus bets. So go find that. And if you're missing football, I wish there was just a way you could bet on the Broncos not to win the Super Bowl in 2024, because that would be a great bet. But there are some football futures already on there. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. David, let's continue this buy or sell here with something a little different, because we have some intel that came out of the combine from Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, someone a very, very notable reporter who was answering some questions specifically about what the Chargers have going on. But if you guys have a chance, make sure to go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel where you can get insight from every sports league, and you're getting it from the local experts the way that only Locked On can provide. So make sure you guys go subscribe to that. But David, I'm going to break this Jeremy Fowler quote down into 4 different parts, because I think each of the sentences here give us kind of great insight into what's going on in this Chargers offseason. And the first one is this: I'm leaving Indianapolis optimistic about Allen returning, possibly on a new or reworked deal. Check and check. We knew he had to stay. We said he had to stay. The new deal helps you with some cap purposes and gives you some more flexibility. This is great news. It's what we thought would happen, but nobody had been out there saying it was going to happen. This is the closest thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is not a surprise to me, just based off of what everybody has been saying about Keenan Allen, whether it's Jim Harbaugh, whether it's Joe Ortiz, whether it's anybody in the media. They've all said the same thing. We've had this feeling a long, long time. Like, this is something that was more of a foregone conclusion, but it is nice to have somebody with the reputation of Jeremy Fowler coming out and saying, hey, this is something I feel really good about happening. It makes too much sense. Go out there and do it. It helps you in the cap, and then you keep one of your best players in a Chargers uniform.
One of the things we've told you recently, too, is just like the wide receiver room after 2024 looks like this. It's Quentin Johnston, it's Darius Davis, and that's it, right? So it's more of a low-key need. This helps you in the short term, keep him around a little bit longer. It also gives you a chance to give yourself some flexibility this year and pay your Keenan Allen with Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially, right? Which seems awesome. The other thing is Mike Evans just got paid to go back to Tampa. It'd be interesting to see, how that impacts this. It was a 2-year deal for $52 million. Is Keenan Allen still going to get $26 million? Does that kind of throw a wrench in things? That'll be interesting to see. But the next part of it here is he says, a few teams asked me about Khalil Mack as a trade option, and it seems like there's some interest there. That is also great news for the Chargers.
It is great news because they have to move one of these guys. They have to move Khalil Mack or Joey Bosa. It's something that really has to happen when you look at the Chargers cap situation. And it makes a lot of sense that people would be interested in Khalil Mack. He just came off of one of his most productive seasons of his entire career. Yeah. And he was healthy, and he's been healthy the last 2 years. So when you have that production and you have the availability, then you're gonna have a market. That's just the way it works in the NFL.
And it might just come down to this, right? Would you rather keep Bosa and get something for Mack, or keep Mack and get nothing from Bosa, right? And that might be where they're at right now. And if you can get something back for Khalil Mack, and you're going to have to release him anyways as the guy who single-handedly clears up the most cap space for you in 2024, it's going to feel like a win, but it also feels hard because he does feel like a guy that totally embodies what Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter and these guys are trying to bring to this organization, because he has the toughness, he has that dog in him. So that's what I think makes me not 100% convinced that it goes down that way, but it does.
Yeah, we don't want to see it, but it's
that's
business.
What we've been saying is what we feel like is going to happen, and that kind of backs that up. So the other one here is a little bit more obvious. Mike Williams is coming off an ACL tear and is in the final year of his deal, which is why some are wondering whether Los Angeles will release him outright, but he's also an immense talent. It doesn't feel like there's another option for the Chargers to do, David, than to release Mike Williams. So, I mean, he's hearing that, and that feels like the most likely thing that's going to happen.
I love Mike, and I'll say it as many times as I feel like I need to. It's been an absolute pleasure watching him. I've really thoroughly enjoyed him being a member of the Chargers, but the fact of the matter is they save $20 million in cap space if they let him go, and they have to. They need that space. This is probably one of the easiest decisions that they're going to make, unfortunately.
I think what you get here reading between the lines, David, is also something we've talked about too, is just he's not saying there's trade interest for him, right? It's teams that are lurking around like vultures who see a guy that's probably going to get released, and which really gives the Chargers no leverage. And the thing is, it sucks because the Chargers undoubtedly are losing a really good player, and I think that's something that gets lost in the wash when you talk about releasing these guys. It can really kind of feel like you're minimizing what they brought to the table. The Chargers are losing a really good player, but they're going to have to lose good players. And the other part of it is you're losing a good player who's missed 18 games for you, and the most important playoff game, the only playoff game in Justin Herbert's career as well. So which obviously the playoff game, not any fault.
Yeah, that's Staley's fault.
That was a Brandon Staley special, not to put that on him. But the main thing is here is like you're paying him to not get his services anyways right now. Right. So you have to get under. He's the guy that makes the most sense. And this was interesting too because he also said Jeremy Fowler, that is, and it feels like anything is possible with Joey Bosa, who's a premier player but hasn't stayed healthy. And I guess if you're trying to read between the lines and find something on the tea leaves here, David, it would just be like maybe him not closing the door on potentially him and Bosa both being gone, or Bosa and Mack both being gone potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Joey, we all know what it is. Joey's a super talented player when he's on the field. But he has missed way too much action the last several seasons. And, you know, he doesn't have the big sack numbers that are really attractive. Obviously, we know he's a great defender. He's a great run defender. When he's at his peak, when he's on the field, like when he's healthy, there's not many the edge rushers that are better. But that availability is a massive thing. And just the laundry list of injuries that he has been through and had to overcome, I think that just muddies the waters when you talk about Joey Bosa.
It does, and it's always, I mean, it's the same storyline every year, right? And I think the hard thing with this is the real easy time to get out of Bosa's contract is next year. So, like, if you trade Mack, you keep Bosa for this year, you still kind of have that parachute that you can pull after 2024 where you can save more money and save, you know, extra cap space in 2025 going forward. So it's not the end of the world if he ends up staying. It's not something that's going to hurt them for years and years to come. Right. The worst case scenario is, hey, he can't stay healthy again, and the Chargers save big money after 2024. But he is, if you're trading Mack, still one of the only premier players on defense you have left. So hoping that, you know, Ben Herbert can help with this, right? Hoping that this new regime can get the most out of Joey Bosa, can get along with Joey Bosa, can, you know, find that form we've seen from him before, and maybe physically he can't get there. But I still think there's a chance, you know, you could see him give much better production than obviously what we've seen, which, again, is a pretty low bar. But we know, to me, when he's healthy, still a really, really good player. And I know he gets a lot of hate I understand wanting to keep Mac over Bosa, and a vacuum might do the same thing. But this is what it feels like, and I still feel like there's some hope you can get something good out of that. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. We have so much more to get into. We have a loaded week, whether it's free agent stuff, whether it's Chargers, mailbag, which you guys can hit up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter, where we'll put a post out, or call into 323-524-7924 and leave a 30-second Chargers question on the voicemail line and do it like an old school sports radio show. But to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. For the YouTube audience, I can't keep my light on for some reason. I don't know what's going on here. But for everyone else, make sure you can also listen wherever you get your podcast from. For those listening on the podcast, just know that I'm glowing in the light of, angels and things like that. I've never looked better. But that is going to wrap things up today. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow. You can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports, David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD, and the show's page again at Locked On LAC, and on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But the offseason's starting to heat up, guys. Make sure you are back here tomorrow to be a true everydayer. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.